I am Adi, a private sector employee working in the Sudirman area of Jakarta, but living in Bogor, Indonesia. For over 10 years now, I've been commuting daily between Jakarta and Bogor. Yes, it's been more than 10 years, because back then my college was also in Jakarta. At that time, I didn't want to rent a place there. I preferred commuting daily. This Jakarta-Bogor commute has become a habit, continuing through my work, marriage, and finally owning a home in Bogor. I actually prefer living in Bogor and never once considered living in Jakarta. Anyway, I can manage everything without living in Jakarta, thanks to the improving Jakarta-Bogor transportation. One of the public transportation options is the train. Since college, I've been very familiar with this mode of transportation, from chaotic to now orderly. Even though I have my own vehicle now, I still prefer taking the train over dealing with Jakarta's traffic. During the journey, I've experienced ups and downs dealing with other passengers on the train, joy and sorrow. But overall, I enjoy the Jakarta-Bogor train journey, mostly the joys, to be honest. Now, let's get into the exciting part, the mystical stories about the Jakarta-Bogor train. I've heard many strange and eerie stories from fellow passengers about ghosts and mysteries surrounding certain stations like Manggarai Station in Jakarta or the haunted train at University of Indonesia Station and other reputedly haunted stations. These stories have spread far and wide. I'm someone who usually leans towards logic and tends to be skeptical about the mystical and ghostly. Though I can't deny that I've had a few eerie experiences myself, I continue to prioritize logic. Regarding these spooky stories about the Jakarta-Bogor train, my stance has been the same. Until 2015, I wasn't much of a believer in these stories because I hadn't personally experienced anything eerie while on the train. Yes, only until 2015, because that year, I finally experienced something beyond reason inside the Jakarta-Bogor train. Here's the story. Oh yes, there's something I should tell you first. There have been strange occurrences that I've experienced several times while on the train. Before 2015, whether heading out or returning, I sometimes saw strange, odd scenes. But these scenes were more frequent when it was dark, especially at night. And if I count, these scenes were very rare. Maybe only 4 or 5 times a year. Quite rare, right? That's just how it is. What kind of scenes are these? I've almost forgotten, but it seems I first saw these strange scenes back when I was in college, maybe just once or twice, and never again afterwards. Until I started working, then they started appearing again, but very rarely. So even though rare, I'm very certain that I've seen several times that there's a mysterious station crossed by the train. When passing through this station, the train keeps moving without stopping, just passing through at high speed. I often take the train. I know the sequence of stations from Jakarta to Bogor very well. Their locations and distances are ingrained in my mind, and this mysterious station is outside of all the stations I know. It's located between the cities of Depok and Bojonggede, but I never knew the exact location for various reasons. Firstly, the train is always moving at high speed when I realize I'm passing it, so there's only a few seconds, not enough time for me to observe in detail. Secondly, I don't know if I remembered wrongly or what, but I feel like the location of this station always shifts, or maybe I just forget, because the appearances are so far apart. What's certain is, as I said earlier, it's between Depok and Bojonggede. Finally, because I was so curious, one day I noted down on my phone where this station was the last time I saw it. At that time, I noted it was between the University of Indonesia and Pondok, China. I wrote it down. You know, several months later, when I saw it again, turns out this station had moved. Now it was between Sidium and Bojonggede. Strange, right? Maybe I just noted it wrong, remembered it wrong, maybe. Many times I've tried to find a logical reason for that incident. Because of my curiosity, once I even rode my motorcycle along the train tracks between the University of Indonesia and Bojonggede, aiming to find this mysterious station. The result? I didn't find it. Again, maybe I saw wrong, remembered wrong, or noted wrong. I also thought, Maybe it's an old station that's no longer in use, because every time I see it, it's always empty and deserted, not a single person in sight. The lighting is minimal too, just a few lights giving off light. So maybe that's why this station isn't visible from the road and the crowd, maybe. Although I rarely see it, I've become somewhat familiar with the shape of this station. Like other train stations, before entering the main building, there's a long iron fence standing on both sides of the railway tracks. This iron fence usually alerts me that I'll soon be crossing it. Not long after, I enter the main building. A long, dark platform is the site, with a row of buildings behind it that I assume to be the station office. Characteristic of Indonesian stations, remnants of old Dutch design can still be seen, standing majestically alone in the darkness, suggesting a somber atmosphere in its emptiness. Oh yes, there's something unique about this station. There are visible stairs, wide with a metal divider in the middle, two sets of stairs located at the northern and southern ends. These stairs lead to the upper floor of the station. Both ends of the stairs are always dark. I've never been able to see clearly what's above them. That's the description of this station. Oh yes, one thing for sure, I've never seen anyone inside, always quiet and empty, truly quiet and empty. That day was a Wednesday, nearing the end of the year 2015. I remember it well, because Wednesday was the day when I had to visit several branch offices in Jakarta for a small audit. This activity was regularly scheduled every Wednesday of each week, mandatory to conduct. On Wednesdays, I almost always returned home late, because audit activities cannot be rushed, and the branch offices that needed to be visited were quite distant and numerous. Usually, I finished my visits in the late afternoon, and almost always returned to the headquarters immediately to compile my report, aiming to submit the results to my boss the next morning. Compiling this work report took a lot of time too. The earliest I could leave was around 9 at night, if there were no issues found in the branch reports. If there were problems that needed investigation, I would end up staying even later. That day was quite exhausting, with many irregularities found in the branch reports that required investigation. The distant locations of the branches meant I could only return to the office by nearly 7 in the evening. Once back at the headquarters, I had to compile the visitation report before I could leave. Truly a tiring day. In short, around 10:30 at night, the work was finally done. "Addie, come with me, but just to Manggarai, okay? I don't want to go to Sudirman." Daniel offered a ride while I was still standing at the security post waiting for a taxi to take me to the station. Daniel's offer made me consider it, as I couldn't see any taxis around that late at night. Meanwhile, I started to panic a bit because the night was getting late, worried I might miss the last train to Bogor. Daniel offered a ride to Manggarai Station because it was on his way home, rather than Sudirman Station where I usually catch the train every day. "All right, Daniel, I'll go with you. Manggarai is fine too," I replied. A few seconds later, I was comfortably seated on the back seat of Daniel's motorbike. It was still 10:40 p.m., with enough time to catch the last train, which, if I remember correctly, was at 11:15 p.m. Daniel's motorbike moved at a normal speed, and in about 15 minutes, I should have arrived at Manggarai Station. And indeed, with just a few minutes to spare, it was 11 p.m. when I finally reached Manggarai Station. I got off the motorbike while Daniel continued on his way home. At 11 at night, there were still a few people wandering around the station. Of course, it wasn't as busy as usual during normal and rush hours. It was actually quite deserted to me. Going home around midnight like this was quite rare for me. As I mentioned earlier, I usually settle into the train by around 9 at night. That night was like any other normal night. The hustle and bustle of Jakarta City continued, indicating that it was always alive. The stifling air slightly eased as the day progressed towards its peak. The air I breathed a bit fresher than earlier hours. But still, sweat trickled as I walked towards the platform to wait for the train. "Is the Bogor train still running, sir?" I asked the security officer who was faithfully on duty, ensuring the last train was still available, not yet passed. It's still running, mister. The Bogger train just passed. You can catch the next one, but it will be a bit late. There was a technical issue," explained the officer. I regretted being a bit late earlier, so I missed the 11 o'clock train by a few minutes. So now, my hope rested on waiting for the last train. "Okay, sir, thank you." After that, I walked to the platform, looking for a seat while waiting for the train to arrive. My body was exhausted from the day's activities. Combined with the drowsiness creeping in, I hugged my bag and sat on the iron seat, observing my surroundings. Strangely, it was very quiet. This situation didn't feel normal to me. It was too quiet. Yes, very quiet. I saw 2 security officers standing in the distance, watching over the pedestrian crossing when people needed to cross the railway tracks. Besides them, there were 2 or 3 others, like me, waiting for the train to Bogger, standing on the same side but at a distance from each other. For a station like Mangarai, located in the capital city, this situation felt odd because it was so deserted, truly deserted. A gentle night breeze began blowing cold air, touching my body, brushing my face. The drowsiness I had been feeling intensified. It was already 11:13 p.m. The train should arrive in a few minutes, but I immediately remembered what the officer said about it being slightly late due to technical issues, so I resigned myself to the delay. Finally, unable to resist any longer, the gentle breeze slowly pushed my body to lean against the back wall. The drowsiness increased, and I startled awake several times, sitting and hugging my bag in my lap, until finally I really fell asleep, but perhaps only for a few minutes. A bright flash of light pierced through my still closed eyelids, so bright that it dazzled me. It woke me from a brief sleep. After rubbing my eyes briefly to clear my vision, I finally saw that the blinding light came from a train's headlight. The train has finally arrived, I silently thanked. True enough, as it approached closely, I could see Bogger written on the front carriage. Yes, this was the train I had been waiting for. So I stood waiting until the train came to a complete stop. It was then that I noticed, after looking around, that there was no one else around me. Wait, after observing closely, I did see a few people standing in the distance, in the same position as me, waiting for the train to stop and the doors to open. These people appeared to me as mere silhouettes, dark shadows, but then I thought perhaps it was because it was dark and poorly lit at the far end that they appeared this way. Well, I didn't think much of it and waited for the train doors to open. Finally, the doors opened, and without hesitation, I boarded the train. Just a few seconds later, the doors closed. Once inside, I walked to find a seat. Finding a seat turned out to be quite easy, as the train was nearly empty. Yes, the carriage I boarded was almost empty, with only me and a middle-aged man passenger sitting at the very end. Oh well, maybe it's because it's almost midnight, I thought to myself. Glancing at my watch, it showed 23:30. I chose a seat in the middle, not far from the exit door. With very sleepy eyes, I sat back with the intention of continuing my sleep. I glanced briefly at the middle-aged man sitting at the end. He sat quietly, staring ahead, seemingly observing something outside. He was around 50 years old, wearing a white shirt, black pants, with a thick mustache, mostly gray like the hair on his head. Occasionally, he smiled to himself while observing whatever caught his attention outside. After that, I didn't pay much attention to him, opting instead to rest for a while with my eyes closed, drifting off to sleep briefly. Roughly a few minutes later, I woke up again, this time due to hearing a very loud train horn. Where have we reached? I wondered to myself. Suddenly, I noticed that the train was passing through a station, but I wasn't sure which one because I had just woken up. "Let's pass our Mingu station," said a man sitting at the end, smiling. I smiled back. Maybe because he saw I was confused, he gave me information about which station we were passing. But why isn't this train stopping at Pasar Mingu station? Why is it continuing to move past it? Maybe it already stopped earlier, but I was still asleep, so I didn't realize. It was a bit strange because the train was still empty, no additional passengers, just me and the man sitting at the end. But oh well. After that, I settled back into my position as before, intending to continue sleeping. From Pasar Minggu Station, the next stations were Tanjung Barat, Lenteng Agung, and so on. But strangely, after reaching Tanjung Barat, again the train continued without stopping, maintaining a constant speed. Why is this train like this? Why isn't it stopping at every station? Is this a night express train? It goes directly to the destination without stopping at intermediate stations. I was surprised because the man who was sitting at the end suddenly appeared a few meters to my right, closer to me. An express train? But there are no express trains nowadays, I asked curiously. This train goes directly to the destination, the man replied shortly, his eyes still looking ahead, a small smile on his face as if observing something. Well, it's good if this train goes straight to Bogor, so the journey time will be faster, I thought casually. After that, my drowsiness disappeared, and I started paying more attention to the journey. As the man said earlier, our train didn't stop at all the following stations: UI, Pondok China, Depak Baru, and so on. It continued to pass these stations at a constant speed. Indeed, sir, the train doesn't stop at every station. That's good, I said to my fellow passenger. But he didn't respond, just sat silently facing forward with a faint smile. Until this moment, I didn't feel that anything was amiss. But my feelings would drastically change in the next few minutes. Sidim Station, just like the stations before it. The train continues past Sidim Station. Next, the train should arrive at Bojonggi Station. That's how it should be. But the travel time from Sidim to Bojonggi, which shouldn't be long, has now stretched to more than 15 minutes without reaching it. This is too long because the train hasn't slowed down its speed. Here, I start feeling something strange. Where is Bojonggi Station? Why haven't we arrived? Be patient, we're almost there. Once again, the voice of this man startles me, perhaps because he sees panic on my face. But as it turns out, what the man said is true. A few minutes later, the train starts to slow down, reducing its speed. The horn sounds a few times, indicating that the train is approaching one of the stations ahead. I guess it's Bojonggi Station. Straightening up, I try to look outside, trying to recognize which station this is. Finally, the train enters the station area. But a few minutes later, I realize when the train is moving very slowly before it actually stops. Strange, I wonder, because it turns out this isn't Bojonggi Station. No, I'm sure of it. So what station is this? This station is almost dark without lighting, perhaps only a dim light from a few small lamps in the station corners. Finally, the train stops completely, and then the doors open. Curious, I stand up from my seat, intending to pay attention again. Which station is this? We've arrived. I'm getting off here. The man says politely to me, I still feeling strange, just nod. Then he walks away, heading towards the stairs at the end. I continue to watch. Then he climbs up those stairs, upwards, and disappears into the darkness. Wait, there are stairs? Finally, I realize where I am. This isn't Bojonggi Station. It turns out this is the mysterious station that has intrigued me for years. A station whose exact location I don't know. I've memorized the shape of the building, which makes me sure that this is indeed the mysterious station. Suddenly I shiver, but still curious. I keep watching the place from the train door that still hasn't closed. As I saw before, this station is empty. Absolutely no one, no signs of life. The emptiness cuts through my veins. Stopping time, it's very deserted. I'm getting more scared because it seems like I'm the only one left in this place after that man left. Why is this door still open? Why isn't it closing? When will the train move forward? Wondering in my heart, I start to panic. For several minutes I stand at the door, until finally I decide to just get off the train and leave this station. But before carrying out that intention, I see something that makes me have to step back a few steps away from the door. On the stairs to the left, I see movement. I see some people moving down the stairs. Finally, there are people too. I'm slightly relieved to see them. Some of them look like dark shadows. I can't clearly see their faces and figures, maybe because of the lack of lighting. They keep approaching me towards the train carriage where I am, towards the door where I stand. But a few seconds later, slowly I step back away from the door as they get closer and closer. Suddenly, I'm very scared. Ah! Why am I afraid? Because their existence doesn't change. Their forms are still the same as when I first saw them from a distance. They still appear as black shadows. Yes, black shadows. Not long after, behind them, several more figures of black shadows appear with the same form as them, and behind them, even more appear. Finally, their numbers multiply, all heading towards the train carriage door that I occupy. Then I fell, seated in the same seat where I first sat earlier. I'm terrified, watching those black shadow figures, one by one, enter the train. Their shapes resemble humans, with ordinary stature. Some look like women, some look like men, and there are even children. But yes, they are shaped like slightly translucent black shadows. Finally, they are all inside, one train carriage with me. I am the only one still in human form. A few seconds later, the door closes. Then slowly the train begins to move forward, leaving that eerie station behind. The train moves at a constant speed. I sit silently, cold sweat dripping, accompanied by mysterious figures shaped like black shadows. The next moment, I dare not look at them anymore, because I feel like they are all looking back at me, staring silently. God, I am so frightened. I don't know what beings are traveling with me. But thankfully, it doesn't last long, because next the train slows down, reducing its speed, indicating it is approaching the next station. Indeed, there is a station. In my heart, I intend to get off at this station. Whatever station it is, I don't want to linger in this haunted train. Finally, the train stops, and I stand up and approach the door, praying and hoping that the door will indeed open. The prayer is answered. Suddenly, the door opens, and I quickly get off. Such relief. Finally, I can leave that train. A few seconds after I get off, the train immediately moves forward, leaving the station, seemingly intending only to let me off. Strange. I stagger as I step in relief on this station platform. Bogger? Is this Bogger Station? Yes, apparently this is Bogger Station. Why am I suddenly at Bogger Station? Suddenly, my phone rings, and I answer it. Honey, where are you? Why haven't I heard from you? My wife's voice comes through the phone. Later on, I found out that my wife and her sister were already in the parking lot of Bogger Station, intending to find and pick me up when I had been out of contact for several hours. Out of contact? Yes, my wife said I had been missing for several hours, unreachable, and she was panicked. After meeting them in the parking lot, it turned out that it was already 3 in the morning. But earlier, it seemed like I hadn't even been on that scary train for an hour.